Namo Buddhaya. Good evening. Welcome to the Buddha Dhamma TV. I am Karen Tan. Today we start our program, as always, with a blessing service led by Venerable Buddhist monks. To attain the desired calmness, please listen to the chanting mindfully and peacefully.
Siriditi matite jo jaya siddhi mahiddi mahagunang aparimita punyadhikarassa sabbangtaraya nivarana samattassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa Dvattingsa mahapurisa lakkhananubhavena asityanu vyanjana lakkhananubhavena attuttara satamangala lakkhananubhavena chabbanna rangsyanubhavena ketumalanubhavena dasaparamitaanubhavena dasa upaparamitaanubhavena dasa paramatta paramitaanubhavena sila samadhi panyānubhavena buddhānubhavena dhammanubhavena sanghanubhavena tejanubhavena idyanubhavena balanubhavena nyaya dhammanubhavena chaturasiti sahassa dhammakkhandānubhavena navalokuttara dhammanubhavena attangika magganubhavena atta samapatyanubhavena chalabhiññānubhavena metta karuna mudita upekkhanubhavena sabba paramitaanubhavena ratanattaya sarananubhavena tuihang sabba roga soka upaddava dukkha domanasupāyāsā vinassantu sabba saṅkappā tuihang samijjantu dīghāyuko hotu satavassa jīvena samangiko hotu sabbada ākāsa pabbata vana bhūmi tatāka gangā mahā samudda ārakkaka devata sada tumhe anurakhantu.
Now, please join us for our upcoming insightful talk with Venerable Dr. Bande Punaji. Bande's insights are not only enlightening, but also remarkably rational, requiring your attention to unravel the profound depths of his Dhamma discourse on happiness is a state of mind. Don't miss out as Dr. Bande Punaji sheds lights on this deep topic.
Well, last time we spoke about happiness, so I have to repeat some of those things that we said. Especially when we speak about happiness, normally people think that happiness is stimulating the senses. Stimulating the senses is not happiness. That is what we call pleasure. So pleasure is seeing beautiful things, hearing beautiful music, or smelling pleasant perfumes, tasting pleasant food, or touching pleasant touches. That is called pleasure. Our pleasure is different from happiness. Happiness is a state of mind. And that state of mind should be free from worries and anxieties, free from all kinds of disturbances. The mind that is calm and tranquil, that is the happy mind. Now, young people like the teenagers, they can never understand happiness because they are all the time going after pleasures. They think pleasure is the happiness. But pleasure is only one kind of sensation that we experience. There are three kinds of sensations: pleasant, unpleasant or painful, and the neutral sensation. So, we are attracted to the pleasant sensation and we are repelled by the unpleasant sensations. But the problem is, both pleasant and unpleasant sensations are just temporary. They're not permanent. So, if we are attracted to the pleasant sensation, we like to have the pleasant sensation, but it is not there always. So, when it is absent, we become unhappy as a result. So, we derive not only pleasure from the pleasant sensation, we also derive unhappiness due to the absence. In the same way, the unpleasant sensation, when it is present, we become unhappy. But when it is absent, we become happy. So we derive happiness as well as unhappiness from both pleasant and unpleasant sensations. So the pleasures are not the real happiness. This is why the Buddha pointed out that if you want to be happy, you should learn not to be attracted by the pleasure and not to be repelled or not to hate pain. And that is something that could be cultivated, because that is simply an emotional reaction to pleasure and pain. So if we can learn to calm the mind and relax the body, we can be happy. And that happiness is being undisturbed by pleasure and pain. Now, as people begin to grow older, they begin to understand this through their own experience. It is the young people who don't understand it, and when they get into trouble, they don't know how to come out of it. This is why they try to take these new drugs, thinking that that could make you happy. But that is not the way to happiness. So it is very important, and once you get into the drugs, then of course you become addicted to that. And then you can't get out of it. So that is worse than the unhappiness you get by going after pleasures. And this is why people try to get into meditation and see whether they can get into a kind of trance. They think meditation can put you into a trance where you become happy. But that is also not true. What puts you into a trance is not meditation. That is what is called hypnosis. And hypnosis and meditation are two different things. Because in hypnosis you try to concentrate, and that trying to concentrate makes you tired. And when you become tired, without your knowledge, you go into a kind of sleep. And this sleep is not the normal sleep, it is what is called the hypnotic sleep, which is a state midway between waking and sleeping. It is a state that everyone passes through when you go to sleep. So that stage between waking and sleeping is extended in the hypnotic state. That is the trance that people begin to experience. And in that trance, you are dreaming. So you get into that dreamy state. That is the hypnotic state. But meditation is being awake, not sleeping. That is very different from the sleepy state of the hypnotic state. So that is very important to understand. So today someone was calling me from Sri Lanka and asking me about meditation. They are also confused because they tend to think that they don't know what hypnosis is, but they naturally enter the hypnotic state because they begin to concentrate. And they think they have entered samadhi. So I always tell them that entering the hypnotic state is not such a difficult thing. But entering samadhi is fairly difficult, because you have to get rid of your emotions or emotional excitements and calm the mind. And that is something that you have to practice for a long time. Hypnotic state, within 5 minutes you can enter the hypnotic state. You don't need to struggle very much for that. So it is very important to understand that what we call samadhi is purifying the mind. Purifying the mind is very important to understand that. Our mind is like water. And water can get polluted. And when the water is polluted, if the water becomes muddy, then you can't see through the water. Or even if the water is disturbed, even then you can't see through the water. But in the same way, the mind can be polluted when the emotions are aroused. And then you can't think clearly. You see, when we speak of the mind, we should understand that there are two parts of the mind, a thinking part and the emotional part. And the thinking can be done properly only when the mind is not polluted by the emotions. So, it is the emotions that pollute the mind. So when we say mind and thinking, we are referring to the activity of the brain. When we talk about the emotions, we are really talking about a disturbance in the whole body. It's not just the mind. When we talk about emotions, an emotion is aroused when a message goes from the brain to a gland, and the gland secreting a hormone into the blood, and the blood carries the hormone to the whole body, and changes take place in the body. The various organs begin to function in a different way. Like when you are angry, a hormone called adrenaline gets into the blood, and this is carried to the whole body, and various parts of the body begin to behave in a different way. The heart begins to beat faster, breathing becomes heavier, all the muscles in the body become tensed, the pupils in the eye dilate, and hair stand on end, and all kinds of things happen. And the face becomes distorted because of the muscles. And the face can become red because more blood falls into the capillaries in the face. So all these changes means you have become angry. And when you are angry, you can't think properly. And you begin to use bad language, and you begin to fight and quarrel. See, that's a complete disturbance of the body. And that disturbance is what is today called stress. It is like a situation when planes come and bomb a city. Then you get messages coming from the government asking people to stay at home, not to go into the road, maybe switch off the lights and all kinds of things. And army vehicles will be going around in the roads. So, like that, a lot of things happen which are not normal. And that is what an emotion is. So this is why we should learn to gain control over the emotions. These two things are very important, the thinking part and the emotional part. You see, out of all the animals in the world, the human being is also an animal who is special only because the human being can think and reason out. That is what is special about the human being. And this ability is being used today in the form of science. All the scientific discoveries, inventions, technology, all that is coming from this ability to think, which we normally call intelligence. That is the activity of the brain. But when the emotions are aroused, the emotions begin to dominate the mind. And the thinking can be controlled by the emotions. And we begin to reason out in the wrong way. Although the human being has this special ability to think and reason out, and even the human being has the ability that other animals don't have, which is the ability, when the emotions are aroused, the thinking part can stop the emotional reaction and make a decision whether to be carried away by the emotion or to act rationally instead of emotionally. The human being has this ability, but these other animals don't have that ability. Like a dog, when it begins to get frightened and maybe starts barking, that dog cannot stop that. But the problem is, every human being doesn't make use of this ability all the time. And that is why there is so much crime in the world, wars in the world, all the terrorism, all these things are happening because the human being doesn't make use of that ability. Now, with all the advancements in science, crime has not stopped in the world. Crime has not disappeared. Wars have not disappeared. People have not become really civilized in that sense. Even the so-called civilized people also begin to fight and quarrel. You see, everyone talks about peace and they like peace. But there is no peace in the world. Why? Everyone wants to be happy, but they don't know what happiness is. This is a problem. This is why the Buddha pointed out that the cause of all unhappiness is the emotions. When he used the word tanha, He was referring to the emotions. But today, tanha is translated as craving. Tanha is not craving. Tanha is emotion. And it is the emotion that has to be controlled. Now, emotion can be useful sometimes, like electricity we are using, very useful electricity. But if you use it in the wrong way, it can kill you. Or even fire. Fire can be useful. You can use for cooking. And so many other activities like heating the house. But if you use it in the wrong way, the whole house can catch fire. It can burn you. So these emotions are also like this fire or electricity. This is why the Buddha pointed out that the thinking part should dominate the mind, not the emotions. And that is what the Buddha achieved. Becoming a Buddha means to eliminate emotions altogether. And that is how we can be happy. Happiness is not an emotion. Now today people think there are good emotions and bad emotions. There are no good emotions. All emotions are self-centered. This is what Sigmund Freud found out. Although there are some people who think that there are good emotions, even the Buddha pointed out there are no good emotions. All emotions are self-centered. When the Buddha spoke about metta, karuna, mudita, upekka, some people think they are emotions. Those are not emotions. There was a modern psychologist, Erich Fromm, I think he's also dead by now, but he wrote a book called The Art of Loving. There he pointed out that this word love in English is misleading. Even sexual activity is called making love. You see, that is not love. So he chose 3 Greek words to show the difference between different kinds of love. One word was eros. Eros means sexual love. Love between a man and a woman. That is sexual love. That is an emotion. Then he used another word, philia. That word is also self-centered. That is the love within a family, like the parents love the children, or the children love the parents, or the brothers and the sisters. Now that kind of love is what we call philia. But even that love is self-centered. But then he spoke about another word called agape. And that is unselfish interest in the welfare of others. He quotes the Bible saying, "Love thy neighbor as thyself." That kind of love. There is a joke where someone said, "You can love your neighbor as yourself, but don't get caught." So that is a different kind of love again. It's not that kind of love. This is the love without any selfish motives. You see, that is the selfless love. That is what the Buddha called metta. So metta refers to that kind of love, which is called friendliness or friendship. So it's not an attachment. And so this love, when developed, becomes karuna. Karuna is the depth dimension. How deeply are you interested in the welfare of others? And when karuna comes up, you don't distinguish between yourself and others. Others are as important as yourself. And therefore, all selfishness disappears. Instead of thinking I and you begin to think of we. Just like the mother thinks of her only child, willing even to sacrifice her life for the child. Now that kind of love, when properly developed, all selfishness disappears and you become happy as a result. The happiness is because all unhappiness is self-centered. And when the unhappiness disappears, you become happy. That is called mudita. Mudita is the happiness of selflessness. And that state of happiness is not an excitement. It is a calm, tranquil state of the mind. Peace of mind. And that tranquility means you are not disturbed by the changing conditions or vicissitudes of life. Gain and loss, fame and ill fame, praise and blame, pleasure and pain, these things don't disturb the mind, because the mind is calm and tranquil and unselfish. Such a mind is tranquil and focused within, and is able to become aware of the mental processes as impersonal processes going on, depending on the necessary conditions. That everything that is going on, even inside, is not due to a person doing the thinking or speaking or acting. These are all impersonal processes going on only because of the presence of the necessary conditions. That is to understand the impersonality of all experience. So, this is the kind of happiness that the Buddha spoke of. And that is what we can cultivate by learning to practice meditation in the proper way. Because when I say meditation, it is not the kind of meditation that people do today. Even Buddhists, so-called Buddhists, and even teachers of meditation, they teach the wrong kind of meditation. Because everyone begins to practice concentration. That is the biggest mistake. Meditation is not concentration. Meditation is learning to relax the body and calm the mind. By thinking only good thoughts, unselfish thoughts. So I think I have said enough for the day.
Let's take a short break to enjoy a melodious song entitled Climb the Path with Gladness by Wayfarers. This is a very meaningful and devotional hymn. Let's listen to it together.
Climb the path with gladness in the field of life, vanquishing illusion, ignorance and strife. the greatest lesson by Lord Buddha shown. Forward marching ever in the Dharma's might, till we lead the nations into endless light.
Please now join us for our upcoming insightful talk with the illustrious Venerable Bande Vida from Canada. Bande's insights are not only enlightening, but also remarkably rational, requiring your outer focus to unravel the profound depths of his Dharma discourse. Don't miss out as he sheds light on the rare topic, mindfulness and compassion, the Buddha's Way by Venerable Vida from Canada.
The title of this morning's reflection is Mindfulness and Compassion, the Buddha's Way. Mindfulness and Compassion, the Buddha's Way. And I'm sure some of you are saying, mindfulness, ayo, I keep hearing about this mindfulness. Actually, when I was here in November, December 2019, before the pandemic, one morning, one of the talks I mentioned that in the Buddha's time, he didn't advertise like today, you know. Like next Sunday, we're going to talk about this title, you know, next Friday, this title, blah, blah, blah. Because that's the nature of our modern world. And I said, I would rather just say a Dhamma talk or Dhamma reflection. But a lot of people are always saying, you know, what's the topic? What's the topic? What's the topic? It's like a movie, right? What movie are you playing next Friday? It's like an entertainment. Because as you know, we have so much entertainment these days, right? On TV, YouTube, and so on. Because when I grew up in a rural tropical island, going to a movie, a natural cinema, was a very rare treat, a very rare treat. Of course, we didn't have TV, of course, no internet. And whenever I got to see a movie, when I would go back to school on Monday morning, Monday, Tuesday, I would tell all my friends in school, because, you know, the families were too poor to go to a movie. And I would tell them the movie, the entire movie from start to finish. Because I grew up in a storytelling culture, you know, the way human beings used to do for thousands and thousands of years. Can you imagine? Before television. See, television destroyed a very, very ancient tradition of storytelling, because that's what people used to do at night. They told stories, jokes, they sang songs, and if there was no electricity, you know, they would, around lamps, oil lamps, candles, sometimes a bonfire, and sometimes they would dance, huh? They would get up and dance also. Now, mindfulness and compassion regarding the Buddha's way is also including wisdom. Wisdom and mindfulness, because they go together. And that's what the main quality of the Buddha when you reflect on his life. You can see this. Mindfulness and wisdom. And his other quality was loving kindness and compassion. And apparently he did not separate loving kindness and compassion, you know, metta karuna. He didn't really separate them. He always said metta karuna, according to the records. But I'm not surprised because they go together. Because if you have metta, you have loving kindness, you naturally have compassion. And when you have compassion, naturally, you have sympathetic joy, mudita, which, as I said yesterday, is a great virtue. The ability to share the happiness and good fortune of others, instead of comparing yourself to those people and having envy and jealousy, which is, of course, a mental defilement, mental conflict. But when you have mudita, sympathetic joy, the ego, the self, is not in operation. And this is why you can share in the good fortune and happiness of others, because there's no ego to feel jealous or envious. Great freedom and virtue. Likewise, the virtue of loving kindness and compassion, because the ego, the self, is not in operation. And the third quality of the Buddha is simplicity and renunciation. Simplicity and renunciation. And what is interesting is that when we look at our human mental defilements, you see that there's a very interesting connection, very interesting relationship. And our human defilements are, as you know, our main one is ignorance and delusion. Ignorance and delusion. And ignorance is specifically pertaining to our strong attachment to self, to have a strong self-view. As we explained yesterday, we do have a self. But when we investigate the mind, we see that the self is only a conditioning in the mind. It's not something permanent, not something which is separate from nature, from society, from the world at large. It's not something which is independent, independent from the rest of, from society, from nature. And delusion, as you know, is something that our minds are constantly being subjected to. But most of the time we're not aware of it. Unless you suddenly get angry, or worried, or nervous, anxious. Then we can see the dukkha, the mental emotional suffering that comes from that delusion. And out of this mental conditioning comes self-centered craving and attachment, self-centered craving and clinging. And from this ignorance and delusion comes our aversion, hatred and ill will, all our mental, negative mental states, which I've said before includes, hatred, jealousy, resentment, disrespect, and so on, ill will, and so on. So when we look at the Buddha's qualities and we look at our human defilements, we begin to see the connection, the relationship. And this is a wonderful reflection. And you can do it all, on a regular basis, because it really brings you to the heart of the Dhamma and Dhamma practice and why we practice the Dhamma. We see that wisdom and mindfulness is the medicine, the antidote for ignorance and delusion. Wisdom and mindfulness is the medicine, the antidote for ignorance and delusion. Wisdom, right understanding, right view, overcomes ignorance. And mindfulness is the medicine, the antidote for delusion, or many kinds of delusion. And we see that simplicity and renunciation is the medicine, the antidote for self-centered craving and attachment, clinging. Simplicity overcomes craving, desire, wanting, expectation, greed, of course. And renunciation is the antidote, the medicine for clinging attachment. Very interesting relationship. And of course, we see that loving kindness and compassion is the medicine, the antidote for our, aversion and ill will. It's a very good reflection. And the more our understanding deepens, we begin to realize that we also have Buddha nature. We have Buddha nature. We all have Buddha nature, which is awareness, sensual, present moment awareness and knowing. That is Buddha nature. So even though the historic Buddha passed away, over 2,500 years ago, the Buddha nature is still alive in us. And of course in the Dhamma. This is why before the Buddha passed away, and the monks and lay devotees who were not enlightened or they did not have sufficient wisdom pleaded with the Buddha in great sadness. They pleaded with him not to die, not to leave them. How can we manage without you? The usual attachment, right? Emotional attachment. And the Buddha reminded them, have I not been teaching you the truth of impermanence? That everything has to change, even those that you love, and including all the material possessions that you're very attached to. It all has to change. But then they said, how can we manage, with your great wisdom? Not only your presence, but your great teaching, the Dhamma. And the Buddha reminded them, you must be a light unto yourself. You must be an island unto yourself. And some of them had forgotten, or they hadn't realized the teaching. And then he reminded them, the 4 foundations of mindfulness. If you follow the 4 foundations of mindfulness, that is your true refuge. As long as you're alive, that is your true refuge. You cannot just depend on one teacher, because all teachers are impermanent. They can only live for so long. but the Dhamma is there. He said, when you see the Buddha, you see the Dhamma. When you see the Dhamma, you see the Buddha. It's very true. Not only do you see the historic Buddha, you remember him with gratitude, but you realize through practice that is the Buddha nature that we all have, the awareness, the knowing that can understand the Dhamma. When you see the Buddha or when you see the Dhamma, you see the Buddha. That is what he's pointing to. And interestingly, the Buddha did not, when he began to teach the Dhamma, it wasn't like he was teaching some new philosophy, some new doctrine that he had created. But rather, he was awakened to the truth of Dhamma. You see the difference? He was awakened to the truth of Dhamma. And you always remember the word Buddha means the one who is awakened. He was awakened to the truth of Dhamma, the way things are, the truth of reality, which includes the human condition, right? The human experience. Human problems, human challenges, and dukkha. So even if the Buddha, the historic Buddha, had not existed, the Dhamma would still exist, and the Dhamma is still existing, as long as there are human beings. And when we have the time to really be present, and I'm sure all of you had that experience during the pandemic, where you had to practice this very challenging practice, but it's very worthwhile, namely patient endurance and acceptance. Patient endurance and acceptance. It's a very challenging practice, but it is worthwhile in the end. You begin to come to terms with one basic aloneness. Not loneliness, but aloneness. Because we are alone, whether we like it or not. It's just a natural fact. Even if you're living with people, or you have a marriage partner, you're still alone. As they say, when you're hungry, nobody can eat for you, right? When you're tired, nobody can rest for you. When you have to go to the washroom, nobody can go for you. Even if a good friend offered to do that. You sit there, I'll do it for you because I'm so kind. Right? It doesn't work that way. So I hope you're able to have that understanding, that natural fact of aloneness. And when we understand it, which comes, of course, with mindfulness, with calmness, a stable, balanced, clear state of mind, then we can enjoy our own company. We don't need other people all the time for company. But these days, of course, in a way you have the advantage because there's also always internet, right? Radio, TV, books, and of course WhatsApp. But that's only if your smartphone is working. But if it's not working, or you have a power failure, then you can't use TV or internet. And in Sri Lanka, I had to be patient with the power cuts. And not just 1 hour or 2 hours. Sometimes there were like 5, 6 hours. No power. So I had no choice but to practice, again, patient endurance and acceptance, just not having power. And you can imagine what people in Malaysia and Singapore, how they managed before electricity was invented in this climate. You remember the hand fan? That's right. And the Chinese used to have these beautiful hand fans. I'm curious, when was the last time any of you ever used a hand fan? Right? So in a way you're fortunate, but at the same time too, you've been very pampered. You've been very pampered. Now, delusion, as you said, is something that we're constantly being subjected to. Simply because we're conditioned to react. We're conditioned to react all the time. And our brains, our minds have been educated, programmed to label, judge, criticize, compare, condemn, right? To like, not to like, to want, not to want, to have aversion, of course, ill will. And initially we don't see this as delusion. And we don't realize that we're conditioned, we've been programmed to react. We don't see it as normal behavior, right? But it's a source of delusion. Especially when, we get angry, upset, afraid, anxious, and so on. Then you can see it. Or somebody criticizes you, or say unpleasant things, and you get upset or angry, then you can see it. You can see the delusion, the upset. And for some people, initially, they don't realize that they are being deluded, right? Because we tend to just react to that person's anger or unpleasantness, and we get angry at them also. So then both of you are deluded. You're acting out of delusion. But when we begin to be more mindful, we begin to see this. That our reactions, our conditioned reactions, often make us deluded and suffered. Now, we do need labels to communicate, that's obvious. As we said earlier, including our social labels, I, you, he, she, and our names. But as I mentioned earlier, names are really just social labels. They're not really who we are. And I know in North America, people become very attached to their names. They identify very strongly with their names. So if you happen to call them by a wrong name by mistake, or you forget their names, it's big drama. Just like if you forget somebody's birthday, big drama. And we don't realize that birthdays are really just it's a conditioned behavior. And this is why the Buddha, one of the teachings of the Buddha, was not only finding a cure for sickness, aging, and death, but he also found a cure for birth. Maybe later I'll share this reflection with you. It's very profound. And of course, initially it's very mystifying. How can the Buddha find a cure for birth? And how can he find a cure for sickness, aging, and death? Because, as you know, his physical form had to experience sickness, aging, and death, right? So the cure he found was a mental, psychological cure, based on his profound insight into no self, empty of self, no self, anatta. Very profound. But when you reflect on it, with calmness, then you understand this profound insight and reflection. And it's very liberating. Another source of delusion, apart from our habitual reactions, is by the mind itself, what the mind creates. Because as you know, the mind is always creating stories, right? Countless stories and mini dramas, worries and fears, soap operas, like the Korean and the Hong Kong programs that you're watching now. Yeah, I heard that the Korean ones are very popular now, right? The dramas, yeah, they're very popular. The mind is like that. And most of our fears and worries are an aspect of delusion, mental delusion, from thinking itself, and the power of the imagination, right? Because you can worry and you can imagine so many things. This might happen, that might happen, what if, what if this, what if that. But it's mental delusion. But fortunately, with mindfulness, reflection, we can overcome this delusion. But it's very strong, very strong. And we said yesterday, our conditioned habit, that conditioned fear of ghosts and spirits, right? From childhood, it's a very strong conditioning. And again, it's the power of the imagination, isn't it? Because it's all in the imagination. Because I grew up also in the Caribbean, the West Indies, with ghosts and spirits. The only difference is that I was conditioned with African ghosts and spirits. So this is why I'm not afraid of the Chinese ghosts and spirits. And one of the things I like to do when I'm in Malaysia, Singapore, is to invite people to come and do the cemetery meditation. I've never done one in KL, but I managed to do one in Penang. Simply because this center, called Bodhi Heart Sanctuary, some of you may know it, is located right in the middle of a cemetery. So when I first went there, I think it was 2008, and it was a fairly new center at that time. I was so happy to see all those graves. Because the first thing that came into my mind was, yes, we have to do a cemetery meditation. Because the graves are there. How convenient. Right? We don't have to go to a cemetery. It's already there. And I was able to inspire, I think, 12 people. But it didn't. It wasn't successful. Mainly due to the rain. We got rained out, as they say, or rained on. But we tried to stay as long as possible. And I kept telling the people, don't worry, it will go away. The rain will go away, no problem. And for the first time, it did go away for about 5 minutes. Then the rain came back, and I said, don't worry, it will go away. But the second time when it came, it did not go away. So we were getting wetter and wetter, and I think, yeah, let's go inside. So in the end, the ghosts were actually laughing at us. These silly people sitting in the rain, what are they trying to prove? But in Singapore, we were more successful because the center where I was staying, they were very organized, and they encouraged their members that this is your great opportunity. This Bhante has come from Canada, and he's offering this opportunity to overcome this childhood fear of ghosts and spirits. This is your one chance. You must take the opportunity. And it was very successful. I think we did 2 or 3 cemeteries. And, we rented a bus. We were organized. And at the end, people were very inspired, very happy that they were able to overcome this fear. Because initially you can't imagine, right? But I must say, the cemeteries in Singapore are not spooky. They're not really scary. It's very clean, very organized. I think the cemeteries in Singapore, in Malaysia, are much more scary, right? And some of the cemeteries in Europe, especially Eastern Europe, they are really spooky. But still, if you have this fear, whether a cemetery is spooky or not, the fear is still there, right? The imagination is still there. But again, it does take awareness, mindfulness, to overcome this fear. And I remember one of the participants was a young lady from Indonesia. Because, you have a lot of Indonesians working in Singapore, and they also study in Singapore. So I told people, you sit here, you sit here, you sit there. And some of them, of course, wanted to sit together, right? I said, no, that's cheating. You have to sit at least 10 meters or 10 yards away from each other. And, each grave has a photo, right? Photo of the deceased. So I told this one young lady, you sit here. And she looked at the photo, and she was really nervous. And she said, Bhante, are you really sure about this? I said, don't worry. The ghost is not going to complain. He's not going to complain. But she wasn't convinced. And she said, Bhante, but suppose I tried all the practices that you suggested and it doesn't work. What to do? How to manage? And just very quickly, this thing just came off my head, and I said, sing the happy birthday song. Happy birthday to you. And she was so shocked and surprised that I said that, she started laughing. And because she started laughing, you can imagine the nervousness, the fear went away. And she ended up having a very deep, peaceful meditation. And she was so happy and inspired that she was able to overcome this childhood fear. Because, as you said, the power of the imagination is very, very strong. And we're also deluded by our memories, especially unpleasant memories. Right? We can all relate to that. We all have unpleasant memories. Good memories, unpleasant memories. And as you know, you can remember something that happened a long time ago. And you can still get upset by that memory. Because there's just the nature of the mind. It's so powerful. Especially if you have a good memory. And sometimes you see that a good memory can be a blessing and it can also be a curse, right? You can still have anger over something that happened a long time ago. You can still have regret. You can still feel guilty about something. And those unpleasant memories, they can seem so solid, right? So permanent, so real. But when we apply awareness, present moment awareness, mindfulness, we begin to see that those memories, although they seem solid and permanent, but in fact, what they are as an actual experience in the present moment are only thoughts and images. Only thoughts and images that are happening now, in the present moment. That's all. Only thinking, thinking, thinking. And it's very liberating when we realize that. Of course, you cannot completely erase, all those unpleasant memories, unless you have Alzheimer's. But at least when they arise, we can deal with them skillfully, to know that they're only thoughts and images, and they are impermanent. You look at them and you let them go. And feeling guilty about something that happens, your mistake that you made, it's a universal problem, feeling guilty. And I know in the West, in North America, this is a big problem because people are so judgmental, right? They're so judgmental. And some people even have a lot of self-hate, But it's a form of delusion and ignorance. Self-hate. Because not only are you judging others, but you're judging yourself. And this is why we have to learn to be kind, not only to others, but we have to learn to be kind to ourselves. Because sometimes it's easier to forgive others than to forgive ourselves, right? Because we take ourselves too seriously. We take ourselves too seriously, which is an aspect of ignorance. We're too attached to self. So really, it's not the self that is the suffering, but is the attachment to self. The strong self-view that I'm so important. And I'm at the center of the world and the universe. That's why sometimes it's good to have a bigger picture, a more cosmic view. And I found during the pandemic, some people found it very beneficial, to see the planet, be aware of the planet, what is happening, and then you zoom your mind out and to remind yourself that we're in a solar system, right? And we're evolving around the sun, and the sun is only one star of countless stars in the Milky Way galaxy. Sometimes it helps just to have a bigger picture, as we say. And to realize that, the solar system, by human scale, is so vast, isn't it? So vast by human size, human scale. And yet, it is just a speck of dust. Think of it. The solar system that is so vast by human scale is just a speck of dust inside the Milky Way galaxy. That's right. Just to give you some idea of how immense the galaxy is. Now in KL and Singapore, you won't have that opportunity to see the Milky Way galaxy, right? You have to go to somewhere where there's no light pollution. I think the best place in Malaysia is what's it called, Negeri Sambalan, you know, the park in Pahang State, right? And you can climb up. Lots of students go there camping on holidays, and you climb up the hill. I think there you can get a good view of the Milky Way galaxy. And I was very fortunate that I had the opportunity to see the Milky Way galaxy on several nights, not just one night, where you could lie down and really expand your mind out into the galaxy. And of course, it's good to lie down, otherwise you strain your neck, right, when you look up. But when you lie down, you know, you relax, and you can expand your mind out into the galaxy. I think one of the best places is Australia. You know, of course, you go outside the city, right? Outside the urban areas where all that light pollution, and there you get very, very clear skies of the stars and the Milky Way. You can almost touch the stars there. It's so clear. And it's dry, you know, it's a dry atmosphere. And what is interesting too is that when you first see the Milky Way galaxy, it appears as a two-dimensional image, you know, just flat. You just see it as a flat image. But, you know, when you relax your mind, and your mind becomes, you know, more spacious, open, because awareness by nature is spacious, right? For example, it is because of awareness that we're aware of the space in this room, right? And when you go outside, you can be aware of the space, you know, like the sky and so on. Now, of course, this area is more difficult because there are more buildings now. But, you know, if you go to a park, you can experience that spaciousness. And initially, we don't see that space. We don't experience that space because we're busy thinking, right? All this compulsive chatter in the mind. And all the mental chatter takes up all the space in the mind. So the mind is quiet, the mind becomes more spacious. And of course, I'm sure if you've ever been on a retreat, you begin to experience this, huh? Especially after the first 3 days. Because, you know, when you're living a very busy life, when you go to a long retreat, say 10 days, 2 weeks, it takes at least 3 days to really calm down and to appreciate the present moment. And you've locked away your smartphone. Actually, when you go on a retreat, you have to hand in your smartphone. And you can imagine part of the practice initially is to observe the craving to check your smartphone, right? I gotta check the messages. Then the most important thing in the world. And if I don't check them, the end of the world is going to come, right? That's the nature of attachment, right? The addiction, that's the nature of addiction. Very.
We will teach thy walking side by side. Truth is undivided, this must be our guide. All divisions vanish where the truth is known. This the greatest lesson by Lord Buddha shown. Forward marching ever in the Dharma's might, till we lead the nations into endless light.
That wraps up today's broadcast. If you have any questions or concerns, please contact us at info@buddhathamatv.com. We work hard to share the noble, peaceful, and sublime teachings of the Buddha with you, helping you persuade the spiritual path under his wisdom. Please encourage and support those interested in the rational and enlightened teaching of the Buddha. Thank you for watching. We believe our programs on Buddha Dharma TV will inspire peace lovers around the globe. Good night. Namo Buddhaya.